Right now, Toyota is in the process of rolling out the first 300 right-hand drive converted Tundras in what is expected to be the final development stage of this vehicle before it hits Australian roads officially and goes on sale in sometime in 2025. Now, those lucky individuals will be given the Tundra on a lease program and on the condition that they give feedback to Toyota on what they think of it and what they think of its conversion process. But while there may be some changes here or there, this is what we're expecting to see when it finally goes on sale. And today is our very first drive. Now, of course, Toyota is a little bit late to the full-size pickup party. The Chevy Silverado and the Ram 1500 have been making a huge impression on the Australian public for the last few years. And of course, Ford has recently just introduced their F-150 full-size pickup. So there's a lot of ground to cover here, but Toyota thinks that it's going to offer a key point of difference with the Tundra. Now, Australia certainly isn't short of a ute, but the big ones like these certainly do offer their own unique advantages. For one, they can tow about 4.5 tonne, sometimes more, but this one right here is rated for 4.5 tonne. They've also got huge roads presence. I mean, just look at the size of this thing. And oftentimes, they're really quite comfortable vehicles and quite luxurious inside. And so you can see why so many people who are doing the big lap of Australia are looking to one of these to tow their huge caravan. In many ways, it's a bit of a wonder why this vehicle wasn't here years ago. After all, the Toyota Hilux was the best-selling vehicle in Australia for a very long time, and in a way, people have taken it upon themselves not only to import these through private importers, but also taking the 200 series and the 300 series and chop them up into dual cab utes themselves. So really, this car here seems like an absolute no-brainer. Now, in today's video, we're going to tell you everything you need to know. We're going to tell you what it's like to drive, some unique changes to the Australian model, and we're also going to talk about the quality of the conversion process, among other things. It's a really exciting car, and it's great to finally be checking it out. But before we jump into today's video, please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below if you want to see more content like this. Now, being an American pickup truck, it's no real surprise that this is a made in America vehicle. From there, it's shipped over to Australia and it's remanufactured to right-hand drive in Melbourne at Walkinshaw Automotive's factory. So they're making about 50 a month at the moment. However, we're told that that could scale up once this goes into full production mode. So what you see here is pretty much what all 300 are going to be. 280 of those are going to Australian customers and 20 of those are going to be retained internally for similar testing and evaluation. Essentially, we've got the limited grade here in the crew cab, guys, and we've got the shorter bed. It's about 5 and a bit feet in the imperial measurements there. And it sort of strikes a bit of a balance for what Toyota says our customers are really after, in that they're not so excited about putting things in the tray as they are about towing things behind it. And in general, it's a pretty flash looking car, as we'll see a little bit more of as we climb inside. Look, I quite like the appearance. Some people aren't 100% sold on it, and I can see how the Americanness might be a little bit much for some, but I think it's a little bit more understated than some rivals out there, certainly more than the Ram 1500 TRX, for example. Now, another thing that's really interesting about this Toyota Tundra is the fact that Toyota's bringing it here with the iForce Max system, which is their hybrid system for their body-on-frame vehicles. Now, we've seen that rolled out to other vehicles like the Sequoia, which is essentially America's version of the 300 series. It's a bit longer, a bit more to their taste type thing. And we've also seen it in the Prado with a slightly different engine base. So it's a really interesting system, and that's going to be another point of difference, the Toyota says. Essentially, during their development process, they say they have seen some fuel savings over its rivals, which is very encouraging to see. It's also quite a beast, this hybrid system. It's got an electric motor which sits between the 10-speed transmission and the engine, and by itself makes 36 kilowatts of power and 250 newton meters of torque. Total outputs, it's about 790 newton meters of torque, and that's more than enough to tow 4.5 tons, as we'll talk about a bit later in the video. Look, standing right next to it, you can see that this is a pretty big rig. I'm 6 foot tall, and it's about 5.9 meters long, making it about 600 mil longer than a Hilux SR5. But another point of difference between this and that model is the fact that this has coil-sprung rear suspension, meaning that there's a little bit more focus on comfort in this vehicle, and that's despite that huge towing capacity that we were talking about before. And that comfort combined with a nice interior inside makes for a pretty good experience. So let's go check out the inside. Now, if you're like me and you spent most of your time in mid-size utes, then getting into something full-size like this is a pretty jarring experience in a lot of ways. And I think the thing that strikes you the most is perhaps not the amount of legroom you have, but the width of the cabin. It's really quite huge. The closest real competitor I can think in terms of width is the old generation Amarok. That was the last one that really struck me. And of course, we've seen mid-size pickups like the Triton and the Ranger and the new Amarok expand by an extra 50 millimeters as far as width goes. So there does seem to be some demand for wider utes out there. But in here, it really is a bit of a benefit, and it contributes overall to what is a really quite nice cabin in here. It's hard to believe that the steering wheel was once on the left-hand side of the car. I mean, you press on the dashboard here and it's really not much give at all. It doesn't feel flimsy. It doesn't feel like the cabin plastics have just been thrown together. And during our driving today, we've heard no squeaks or rattles or anything like that. So it's been a pretty impressive experience all round. Really, it's only very small things in this car that make it stick out as an originally left-hand drive vehicle. For example, the shifter here, slightly angled to the left, but you know, I think we'll all live with that one. Now, along with being the first car that Toyota has run through a right-hand drive conversion process from an American-made vehicle, it's also got another first for Toyota products in Australia, and that's the fact that it has an integrated brake controller. I was really surprised to hear this isn't something that's offered in the 300 series, though we do expect that to trickle down later on. And it's really great to see because, of course, the vast majority of the people who buy this car are going to be towing with it. Now, to put a bit of perspective on America's Tundra lineup, of which we're picking from to get our Tundra, the Limited sits at position number 3. It goes SR, SR5, Limited, and then above that we've got things like the Platinum, the TRD Pro, and the top spec Capstone. But considering this one is a lower grade, it certainly is very nice inside here. And we've got a number of amenities which really stick out to me. For example, we've got heated and ventilated seats. That last one's certainly a great one for the Australian market. If I'm being fussy, it would have been great if we had 3-zone climate control.
And we are going to be fussy because this Toyota Tundra is going to be a very expensive vehicle. We don't yet know the official pricing, but it's expected to cost well in excess of $100,000 if the pricing of its rivals are anything to go by.
Some other nice things about this cabin, we have a huge 14-inch touchscreen here, and really this is going to be fantastic for maps on long trips, I reckon. It gives you so much visibility ahead, and also you can have multiple things going at the same time. So certainly nice inclusion for that one. And of course, along with a huge touchscreen, we retain things like physical buttons for climate control, and they really do feel quite good. So it's nice to see those in here. We've also got a wireless phone charger and this absolutely huge center bin down here, which has little pockets that slide away, USB-A, USB-C. It is quite a modern vehicle here, and I suppose that is really to be expected when the Tundra did come out just a few years ago. But anyway, as I said before, let's talk about the seats on here. So these are electrically adjustable. You've got some position memory functions as well, just two, so I suppose you and your partner, and you do have lumbar support, and that's for both the driver and the passenger side. And overall, I do think they're quite comfortable. They do lean on the softer side, I think, which probably caters more to the American market. But on those long road trips, it's certainly nice to have those softer seats. And with that lumbar support, you do feel like you're actually being supported on those longer drives. Though, of course, we haven't had a super long drive in this one. But, you know, the American market seems pretty happy with theirs so far. So overall, look, this is shaping up to be a pretty good space here. It's got a good amount of amenities, a good amount of storage, but that's enough for the front. Let's check out the back. Now, just a few weeks ago, I was reviewing the Hilux GR Sport, and I can tell you the difference between that car and this car is huge when it comes to the back seat room. As I said before, this has the larger of the two dual cab body styles, the crew cab, and I'm really glad that it's the one that Toyota decided to bring here because it's just a huge amount of space in front of your knees, your toe room, and I do actually feel pretty decently supported under my thighs here. Look, they're still sitting in the air a little bit, but considering this is a body-on-frame vehicle, it seems like a very comfortable place to be. Now, this is a genuine 3-seater across the back here, with the caveat, of course, that this seat is a little bit harder in the middle, which is a bit disappointing, I think, because if this was a bit softer, had a little bit more shape, I think that you could happily do 3 people across the back here on a long road trip, but alas, perhaps more comfortable for just 2. As far as actual amenities go here, we've got this lovely pull-down armrest here, some really nice soft padding, which is really great to see, though across the top of the back here, what were some more softer and forgiving surfaces up there revert to a little bit more hard and scratchy surfaces, so, you know, I suppose you can't have it all. As far as other things, we've got some USB-A and USB-C ports. We've got these air vents, which I'm not a huge big fan of. They're a little bit small and they're a little bit too far down. They kind of just hit your knee. They don't really hit your face. It'd be nice if they were a little bit higher, either here or perhaps up here, for example. But you know, I am sort of splitting hairs when it comes to that one. So look, overall, I'm pretty happy with the amount of space back here. Unlike a lot of other utes out here, I genuinely think, for example, you could have a child seat really quite easily in the back here without moving the front seats forward at all, or simply just carry around some extra adults. And even if you're not doing either of those, you can certainly fit a lot of stuff back here. Now here at the rear of the vehicle, we see the huge tailgate which comes down like so, and you'll also notice that it has a standard fit tow bar here. We do expect it to be standard fit when it goes into production, though as I'll say many times today, this is not the final specification, but we do expect it to be very similar indeed. So opening the tray now, the first thing you'll notice is that, well, it's got a damp tailgate. That's very nice indeed. And we've got this nice tub liner that goes like so. Some fairly basic amenities. We've got about 8 tie down points, 4 of which are movable. No 12-volt sockets or anything like that, but it's a pretty handy tray indeed. An interesting thing to note is the payload, which is a little bit reduced. So it's about 758 kilograms, which we understand may move around a little bit, but that is a fair bit down on something like a Hilux SR5, which is about 940 kilos. So a bit of a difference there. But as I said before, this vehicle is more about what's behind it than really what's in it. But at the same time, does that make this a vehicle that's less desirable for you? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. So, driving the Toyota Tundra. Now, I'm going to be honest right off the bat and say that I've certainly spent a lot more time in mid-size utes than I have in full-size utes. And jumping into these, once you get past their big size and everything like that, it was definitely refreshing in a number of ways because there's definitely some key advantages. They do seem to be a little bit more comfortable. And I'd definitely say this one in particular with its coil-sprung rear suspension. The last generation went from leaf-sprung to coil-sprung, and the fact that they've been able to retain the towing capacity is still pretty impressive. An interesting difference between the US market and the Australian market is the US market has technically, I think it's a 5.2 ton towing capacity, and this is rated at 4.5 tons. So there's a little bit of difference there. However, I've spoken to Toyota and they've said that, look, that's more down to just local regulations and trying to have this as a vehicle which is you're able to drive on a regular car license, and that's certainly a major advantage, I think, to a lot of people. Now, as part of that generational change from the second to the third generation Tundra was the switch from the old V8 to the twin-turbocharged 6-cylinder here, the V6, which is kind of similar to the 300 series in a way, going from a V8 to a 6-cylinder. But from what I've heard from our American counterparts, the switch to this engine was certainly an improvement. And I think particularly in iForce Max, guys, it's a pretty sweet thing. So we currently have this engine, in a way, non-hybrid guys, in the Lexus LX 600, and we've praised that car for being really quite refined. And the hybrid system in the Tundra, I do think, is a good one. Maximum outputs, 790 Newton meters of torque, certainly not mucking about. Now, I don't have a 0-100 figure right off the bat, but I can tell you that for something that weighs as much as this, and for something the size of this, almost 6 meters long, it accelerates at a pretty alarming rate. And when we were weaving along some country roads here, it certainly all came together in a pretty good balance. You know, you've got a good amount of power out the corners, and you also do have a reasonable amount of handling in this car. You know, that long wheelbase, this does have a longer wheelbase than a 300 series, meant that there was quite a bit of control, and the ESC does seem to be quite well tuned, not just in these on-road environments, although of course I should note that we are currently driving in a development centre, so perhaps not 100% representative of Australian roads, but also on those dirt road conditions, which are really critical to Australian buyers, I would argue. A lot of our roads, particularly in the areas that full-size truck owners are going to take them, are coated in dirt. You know, these things need to be able to handle well on dirt. And although these things aren't probably going to be doing the most outrageous off-roading, you might argue that vehicles this size aren't really suited to off-roading in Australia. They're simply too big for many trails, but it's certainly great to have that ability to go on those fast-flowing dirt roads and know that you've got a vehicle that can handle it. One thing that probably would improve that ability, I think, is the fact that, well, this has only really got a part-time four-wheel drive system. You can switch, I'm told, between 2 high and 4 high. It speeds up to about 80 k's an hour. But of course, it would be better if you could simply just set and forget and let the car do its own thing, so you could interchange between the bitumen and dirt surfaces without fussing about with any extra dials. But, you know, I suppose you have to have some trade-offs somewhere, don't you? Toyota has also done some work in making sure that the driver assist systems are well tuned, and while we haven't had a chance to sample them all, it's been great to see things like lane keep assist aren't overly harassing you, and when you put it into tow mode, there are some basic adjustments to things like the blind spot system. It's adapted back so it takes into account the length of the trailer, so that's pretty nice to see. We also had a chance to do some fairly serious towing in the Tundra. We had a 3.5 ton trailer, which was about 7 meters long, pretty huge box trailer. And we also had a more condensed trailer that had some concrete in the back. That was 4.5 tons. Certainly my first time towing 4.5 tons. And it was impressive to see how the Tundra behaved. You can see why people often go for utes in comparison to wagons when it comes to towing. Simply that extra wheelbase length really does afford some extra control, and I do think that the Tundra performed quite strongly. As far as differences between the two, look, obviously it was a little bit slower to accelerate when going between the 3.5 and the 4.5, but generally it didn't seem to struggle too much. The revs stayed pretty low, and the tow mode on this does mean that it's focused on gears that it's going to give you torque. And of course, you've got that electric torque, which is nice to get you off the line a little bit quicker and a little bit more easily. One of the things I did try out was coming to a complete standstill at the bottom of a hill, like you would, for example, when you come across some roadworks up in the mountains and you've got some serious load behind you. You don't want to lose momentum. But with the Tundra and its iForce Max system, it didn't seem to struggle much at all, coming from a standstill up to the speed limit on this road, which was 100 k's an hour. So that was certainly very impressive to see. I think it's notable that over in the US, they do offer some options to make towing a little easier. So for example, they do offer air suspension on the rear axle to help sort of make the ride a little bit more comfortable and controlled. Personally, I don't think that would be super necessary. The height of the car didn't really drop a heap even when it had 4.5 tons on the back. And I think it felt pretty controlled even when we went through some of the windier and more narrow driving sections. Toyota said that amongst other things like other body styles and other grades, they are considering bringing options like that over, but I think that's something we're gonna have to wait and see comes to fruition when this thing finally goes on sale. But look, overall, I've been pretty impressed with the Tundra. It's a good thing. It feels really strong, and yeah, look, I can't wait to see what the final finished product looks like. There's no question that Toyota is a little bit late to this whole full-size ute thing, but then this is a company which has never let the idea of being first get in the way of trying to be the very best. But is that actually true in this case? Well, I don't think we can really say for sure until this officially goes on sale, but if pickup trucks like the Ram 1500 have shown us anything, it's that these really do have a place in Australian culture, like it or not. People really like the premium experience, they love the towing capacity, and they love the amount of space inside. Now, some might say that vehicles like the Tundra are simply unnecessary heavy emitting vehicles that are taking up our roads, but I think Toyota goes a little bit of a way to counteract some of those points. First of all, Aussies really are demanding more and more of their utes, as we can see by the growing size of caravans and boats being towed behind them. And I don't know about you, but I'd much rather see something like this towing a huge caravan behind it than some Hilux that's loaded up within an inch of its life. And to the other point, well, Toyota is the first to bring a proper hybrid system to the full-size pickup truck segment. And it's very exciting to see because there's a real chance that this could be the most fuel-efficient ute in this segment. And I don't know about you, but if I was doing the big lap of Australia, I think I'd be willing to leave the petrol V8 at home in my sports car if it meant I was going to save thousands of dollars on fuel costs. Now, this has ultimately just been a first drive, what is still technically a pre-production vehicle, and it's going to be interesting to see if there are any changes as a result of the customer feedback from driving these vehicles over the next 12 months at minimum. But at the very least, the signs here have been really quite encouraging. The twin-turbo hybrid system seems plenty strong enough, and I think enough of us have driven the Toyota hybrid systems to know that they have some genuine benefits in the real world. But I'm keen to hear what you think of the Toyota Tundra. Do you think they've done a good job with this conversion? And are you excited to see one on the road? And do you want to see one in your driveway? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. But for now, that's all. Thanks for watching Chasing Cars.